Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to you live from some unknown location, far and away. Hi, I'm Dustin. I'm with Star City Savages, and I've got some interesting news for everybody. So we recently started a newsletter, and the first issue came out yesterday. So I'm going to be working on that. It's very short. It mostly just introduces who I am and what we're talking about, and it's titled Tales from the Drowned War because that's what we're working on. So we talk about that. We talk about the Kickstarter is coming up soon. Hi, Dylan. How are you? It's going to be July 6th, and I checked, for those of you that are fans of Rifts and of Pinnacle Entertainment, their Kickstarter for Rifts Atlantis is going to be, it's going to be the 22nd, which was yesterday, through July 6th. So I'm actually pretty excited about that, in that I don't have to go up against PEG because they're big, and they make good products, and I'm really excited. I'm going to go, after I get done here, I'm going to go back the Atlantis Kickstarter and keep it from my wife long enough to tell her she's pretty and do lots of housework. So, July 6th is when we're going to have the Kickstarter for the Drowned War. Right now, I'm working on an adventure that was submitted from a member of our community, Luisa Terrio, and it's titled Andromeda Rising. And I'm going through and I'm sort of cleaning up a few things and laying it out, and it's going to be available on Drive-Thru RPG, hopefully by the end of the week. I'm going to be prepping for the next newsletter. I will have to go back after this video is done and input the ability to subscribe to the newsletter. We got some interesting things coming. As I've been talking to some people, more elements keep getting added. For example, we're going to be adding gonzo journalists to our setting. Particularly, they were in Flotilla Pacifica, but when Flotilla Pacifica got moved to a stretch goal, I thought, but the more I keep talking, Shane Cochran, a.k.a. Hatter, and we keep talking, and as we had this conversation about, he does podcasts, about online adventures, it kind of occurred to me, I want like a guerrilla radio somewhere in the Lost Sea. So I threw the gonzo journalists and the gonzo podcasters back in, but I'm going to have a very special sort of radio host on the ham, maybe like a maritime sort of call-in show. And the reason why I sort of am hesitant, because I'm a huge fan of the Fallout series, but at the same time, being a fan of the Fallout series, I want to avoid sort of ripping them off. So this was not always planned, but I think having like shortwave radio it's in enough media. It's in like World War Z. It's in enough post-apocalyptic fiction that it's not particularly just Fallout. It's like there's always somebody on the other end. So you might have a guide coming through. Anybody that's a fan of the Savage Rifter podcast knows about Beacon, who was Sean Masters. Go check out his podcast, Voice of Hope. The concept of that was that you had a sort of person there, and part of me almost wants to approach Sean and be like, hey, if you're not going to do Beacon in Rifts, would you be willing to let me have Beacon show up in the Drowned War? But let me message him about that. So if he doesn't see this before, then it might be a surprise. All right, so if you're going to live in a world covered by the ocean, you're probably going to have to eat some things that you might not like. And one of those things, hey Walter, how are you? We're going to try some seaweed, because people that are stuck out on the ocean, you can't just live on fish. You got to have other things. And we can eat seaweed. Roasted seaweed It says Korean inspiration, so I'm guessing that a lot of people in Korea are fond of it. I've got my handy dandy unsweetened tea ready. Family show. And we are gonna go ahead and take a look. Alright, so this is a thin layer of just green. It's almost like a cracker. It kind of feels like plastic, but this is going to be one of the things that your characters in the Drowned War are probably going to have to eat to survive. And let's just kind of get an idea of how it treats them. It tastes like sushi. It's actually pretty good. All right. Roasted seaweed tastes like sushi. I'll go ahead and tell you this much, though. Even though this is good, this is not something that I think I could eat every day. This is not the potato of the sea. So some of the things that I've been talking about with people, particularly my editors and my playtesters, is what do people eat? What kind of fuel do they use? Where do they get the materials to build with? And for the most part, in the Drowned War, you have a situation where there's no land, and we as land dwellers take that for granted. They create artificial islands, so people are going to actually have to go underground or underwater, dig up the dirt to plant with, but they're going to have to go through this process. I think it's called aspiration. It's a process by which you have to cleanse the salt out of the soil. It's doable. So people are going to have to do that in order to get enough soil to grow things like herbs and so on and so forth. So a lot of people, if they're going to grow their food, they're going to have to rely on something called hydroponics. Hydroponics is this idea that you sort of aerate a container with water directly where the roots are, and that the plants get nutrients by that. Another setup for people in this type of situation for long term would be aquaponics, in which you have a sort of stimulated ecosystem where it's a small fish bed. The fish live there, and then you have a sort of vertical farm above it that puts the water in there. So the fish eat the farm. It's not vertical, it's like plant. They eat at the plants, and they produce the food for the plants through their waste. And you survive by sort of finding the balance between the fish and the plants to eat. But you can't over-farm this because you just create this environment. I've looked at a lot of situations where people will take enclosed sort of ecosystems. They'll put in enough water so that it's in the state of humidity. It becomes humidity, and the humidity nurtures the plant inside this globe. And the longer it goes on, the bigger the plant gets. It's kind of amazing how the water and the vegetation can live. Now, for people that are having a hard time sort of figuring out how to apply that to the game, just remember genetic modification is a thing in this game. One creature that you're going to come across a lot if you play the setting is called the brush beast. You have brush beasts and brush babies. Brush babies are younger, smaller sort of plant-animal hybrids, and brush beasts are larger. That's where you get the soup from. You milk them like cattle. So you get the milk, and that's how you get Palmenti, which is the genetic accelerant. And if you're going to get ambrosia, which if you're playing in Con-El, or if you're going to be taking on a lot of spliceware, cyberware, you're going to need ambrosia. You have to distill it, or you have to purify it. So you get purified, sort of strained out Palmenti, or the soup, is where you get your ambrosia from. So these are predatory beasts because they're not just made of plants and they're not just made of cattle. They're also made of sort of more aggressive animals. They look sort of like skeletons, like animal skeletons, with plant life, with ferns and moss growing out of them. They're also psychoactive because Palminti and ambrosia has a sort of component to it that will potentially activate that. Like, if people are wondering narratively, can I start out playing a specific type of character and then give them the arcane background psionics later on? I said absolutely. They just had a little bit of the soup and that just activated something. One of the Connell variants that you can't play, I mean, if you have a kind enough game master, you might let you play it, is called the Pickle Jar. The Pickle Jar is a Connell that's had a psychic awakening, and in the process, their jar head has popped off and they're just floating around looking for their body. I thought that was hilarious. So I'm going to post the links to the newsletter after I get done here. Give me a little bit of time on that. I'm going to go back the Kickstarter. Then I'm going to go clean the house because, of course, I'm going to back at a really high level. Please forgive me. I can't edit that out. And then I'll get to work. So again, like and subscribe, share, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, join our Facebook group, like our Facebook page. We'll be coming out with more information soon, and take care.